All right, hi there, Todd Cantelons here. Nice to see you. If you've been following along on toddcantelon.com, you know that we are now 5 weeks into our Christ-Centered Life series, which is a sermon series following the story of Jesus as recorded in the Gospel of Mark. I've mentioned this each week where I've preached so far. This series is going to take us 67 weeks. It's going to take us right into May of 2015. So it's going to be a good long study. It's really fun to be able to do this in this context. Hopefully we get some groundswell. I just want to remind you, one of the ways you can help me with this work is by telling people about it. So if you're getting some worthwhile content out of these times together, please don't be shy. Please spread the word. Tell your friends about it. And the more the merrier. So get the word out there. We're going to be doing this for a long time, at least another year or so, working our way through the Gospel of Mark, studying the life of Jesus. We're looking to achieve three things by looking at the life of Jesus. We're looking to really answer three questions. Who was Jesus? Secondly, what did he say and do? And then finally, thirdly, in light of that, in light of who he was, in light of what he said and did, how does my life need to change? Today, we get to help you with three other questions that are also big questions that we all deal with from time to time. Here's the three questions that kind of jumped out of the text for me today as I worked my way through it for you. Number one, how do I overcome this trial? This is something that all of us deal with because all of us go through seasons of difficulty. Guaranteed your life is going to undulate between ups and downs. You'll have seasons of plenty, seasons of peace, and then these will be followed inevitably by seasons of lack, seasons of want, and seasons of strife. Life is just like that. It's a series of ups and downs. When you're growing up, you tend to think in terms of wanting to make it, to get to a point in life where everything's good all the time. It just doesn't really ever happen that way. Life continues to be a series of ups and downs. So you might find yourself in a season of trial. And when you are in a season of difficulty, naturally as a human being, your tendency is to want to figure out how to get out of this situation. None of us like to suffer. None of us like pain. And so naturally we tend to try and figure it out. How do I overcome this trial? That's the first question we're going to hopefully answer today from examining the life and work of Jesus. Secondly, a question that appears in today's text, what am I supposed to do with my life? This is one of the most universal questions of the human experience. What am I supposed to do with my life? At a certain age, you'll begin to think about this question. Why am I here? What am I supposed to do? I remember when I was 11, that's where I kind of first started getting the idea that I needed to be a preacher and a broadcaster. It was 11 years of age, maybe 12, 11, 12. Right around that time, I started thinking about how I was supposed to spend my life. Now, I have met people who say that they don't spend much time thinking about what they're supposed to do, but in my experience, they would be the exception. This could be because I tend to gravitate to people who are like me. I think it's anecdotally true that we tend to gravitate towards like-minded people, so I'm just acknowledging that my sampling might be skewed. But in my limited experience, most of the people I know spend much of their time trying to figure out if they're on the right track. What am I supposed to be doing with my life, and how faithful am I being to that sense of calling? Am I doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing? Am I being a good steward of my time on the planet? What am I supposed to do with my life? Thirdly, this question appears in the text today. When is this going to be over? Or the flip side of that same question, when is this going to happen already? This is hewing to the question of patience. Again, you're dealing with suffering, you're dealing with a difficult time. When's it going to be over? When is this going to end? One of the things that, one of the phrases we use to comfort ourselves when we find ourselves in difficult seasons is, this too shall pass. We know that darkness gives way to light, that the dawn will come, that the winter will eventually end, that spring is on its way. This is a motif that shows up throughout, of course, Christian literature. It shows up throughout much of English literature because English literature has been hugely influenced by the Bible. And so we have this hope that things are going to change. Things will eventually get better. And then if you're working towards something, the flip side of that question, if you're really hoping for something good to happen, if you set yourself up for something, say you've made a good investment and you're waiting for that investment to pay off, when is it going to happen already? Say you're looking for that lifelong relationship to come your way. When am I going to meet Mr. Right? When am I going to meet Mrs. Right? Maybe you're hoping to have a child one day. When is that finally going to happen? Life is a series of when is this going to happen already? So those three questions, I think you'll find that in terms of answering them, the life of Jesus is very instructive for us today. As we look at who Jesus was, as we look at what he said and did, and then in light of that, as we examine how our life needs to change, I think you're going to find the answers to today's three key questions. How do I overcome this trial? What am I supposed to do with my life? And when is this going to be over? Or the flip side of that question, when is this going to happen already? We're learning about Jesus, and we're looking to apply that to our lives. That's our mission. Put another way, we look to Jesus. Today, we're going to learn to get up, to serve, and to be patient. This is Mark chapter 1, verses 29 to 34. Let's read it together. As usual, I'm working out of the New King James Version. Now, as soon as they had come out of the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she served them. At evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. Then he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him. So last week we featured the sequence where Jesus enters into the synagogue in Capernaum, and it's the first time he preaches in the Gospel of Mark. A demon-possessed guy kind of causes a scene. Jesus tells him to shut up and be quiet, delivers the man who was possessed by the demon. And that was kind of the main event of last week's sermon. Today we finish that moment and we move on to the next moment. Jesus finishes preaching and he hits his friend's house. We see what happens in verse 30. Let's look at verse 30 together. Now, as soon as they had come out of the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So Simon's mother-in-law is sick. Now, of course, mother-in-law jokes aside, this was not a good thing. He was not content to just let her lie. She's sick with a fever. Of course, in that age of the world, a fever could be life-threatening. Even in today's world, if you don't live in a developed culture, a fever can be serious business. So she's lying sick. It's pretty serious, and they tell Jesus about it right away. Simple point right off the top here. Next time something terrible happens to you, take it to Jesus. Oftentimes, in the first moments after something really bad happens, we tend to go into damage control mode. We want to try and figure out a solution in our own strength. This is just a little commercial to bring it to Jesus. Next time something bad happens, just stop and pray. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. Just take a minute and say, Lord, I'm going to need some help with this. Lord, would you please help me with this situation? Sometimes just inclining your thoughts towards the Lord and crying out for help is all that you need to do. Just practically take a moment once you've prayed, once you've asked the Lord for help, to listen. Don't just move right on to the next thing you have to do. Take a minute to wait and see if the Lord might speak something to you, if he might breathe some peace into you. Remember that as you're in relationship with God, you're engaging in a supernatural relationship. You, a human being dealing with the God of the universe. So leave some room for something amazing to happen. Call out to God for help, and then just wait a minute to see how he might answer you. Another thing you can do in terms of dealing with difficulty is you can model your dependency on God. A practical way to do this, drawn from my own life, is to pray in front of your kids. When I pray with my kids, if I'm dealing with a season of need, a season of difficulty, I will pray about it in front of my kids. Now, this might be different from the way in which you were raised. I don't know what your life was like, but there's a very good chance that your parents kept their cards close to their chest. I know with my parents, great parents who raised me really well and raised me to love Jesus, to serve Jesus, to obey Jesus, to enjoy Jesus. But there were things that my parents didn't really talk about. I just want to suggest to you, as you kind of enter into your parenting years, to feel free, in light of this, in light of the fact that they bring Simon's mother-in-law's sickness to Jesus right away, in light of the need we have to come to Jesus with our needs, don't be shy about being transparent about those needs in front of your kids. When you pray for help in front of your kids, it does a few things. It models dependency. You don't have to say it, but they hear it. They hear you asking God for help, and they think, oh, gee, my dad needs help, and he's looking to God as the answer to his problems. It also is good to be honest about your need. Okay, so it models dependency, and it also displays honesty. Like you're not pretending like everything is hunky-dory, right? Your kids need to know this. Your kids need to know that you suffer. Your kids need to know that not everything is perfect. It teaches them, almost by osmosis, that following Jesus does not equate, a rose garden, a white picket fence, and a flashy Cadillac in the driveway. This is a notion that's been kind of built into Western Christianity for many, many years, that following Jesus equals a happy life. And it's simply not the case that following Jesus means that everything is going to be good and easy for you all the time. So praying in front of your kids, asking God for help in front of your kids models dependency. It shows that you're dependent on God for help. And also it helps, it demonstrates need. It helps you to be honest about the fact that you need help. And then thirdly, when God comes through, as he always will, when God eventually comes through, this is going to build tremendous faith in the lives of your kids because they will have heard you praying about this for months, sometimes years. And when that comes through, you won't need to say anything. Hey, look, kids, look what God did. You don't even need to be that on the nose. They'll just know. They'll have heard you praying about this over time. And when that thing finally comes through, you can bet that it's going to help to build their faith in a very profound way. They will make those connections for themselves. So next time something goes wrong in your life, let me encourage you to take it to Jesus. Let's look at how Jesus deals with this crisis in verse 31. So he came up and took her by the hand and lifted her up. And immediately the fever left her, and she served them. This is great. He took her by the hand and lifted her up. In the Greek, this means he raises her up. Jesus raised her up. When you hear that phrase, Jesus raised her up, that should start ringing in your ears because this is New Testament motif language. The word raised is very powerful in terms of the New Testament's perspective. If you have any biblical familiarity at all, when I say that he raised her up, you should be hearing John 6 in your mind. And in case you're not, here's the passage I'm referring to. This is the will of the Father who sent me, that of all he has given me I should lose nothing, but should raise it up at the last day. And this is the will of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life, and I will raise him up at the last day. That's from John 6, verses 39 and 40. Powerful, powerful phrase. I will raise him up. This is the great hope of Christianity. You should smile about this just for a minute. I will raise him up. It should make you laugh and smile and just feel good. Okay, this is our great hope as Christians. Someday, Jesus will raise us up forever. So today, we get up and keep going. All right, that's how Christians get up and keep going in the midst of suffering. They don't whip themselves up into a frenzy. They're not manufacturing some kind of fake happiness. Right? A Christian keeps in mind, because they've read the Bible, they've experienced Jesus for themselves by the ongoing work of the Holy Spirit. They know that Jesus has promised to raise us up at the last day. They know that that's the actual will of God the Father, that God the Son should someday raise up all those who belong to him. And if you belong to Jesus, that hope applies to you. Because he's going to raise you up someday, you get up today and you keep going. So the first answer to the first question is that hope in Jesus is how you overcome this trial. That's how you overcome this trial. Hope in Jesus is how you overcome this trial. And then you get to work. Let's look at verse 31. So he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and immediately the fever left her, and she served them. This is really cool. She gets better. Jesus raises her up. She's immediately healed, and she immediately gets to work. From this, we get a very simple but powerful point. You exist to be in relationship with Jesus, and you exist to serve him. That is your raison d'être. That is your reason for being. You exist to serve Jesus. Why am I here? To serve Jesus. What is the meaning of life? It is to be found in serving Jesus. I just want to say that any job can have meaning if you take it as an opportunity to serve Jesus. Any job. So as you go about the sometimes mundane tasks that are attached to what you do for a living, I just want to invite you to redefine those tasks by stopping before you begin the next time and ask the Lord, say, Lord, I need you to help me treat this task as an opportunity to serve you. Lord, help me to serve you with what I am about to do. You'll be amazed at the things that'll come to mind and the doors that will open up if you just make yourself available to the Lord in that way. Lord, help me to use this mundane, menial task as an opportunity to serve you, especially if your work involves interacting with other people. You will find that this is a really easy switch, but it's a switch that you have to consciously make. Begin looking at your job as an opportunity to serve Jesus. So we here find the answer to the second question. What are you supposed to do with your life? You're supposed to serve Jesus. The reason so many people feel so crappy about their lives is because they spend much of their life serving themselves. This is one of the core lies of popular culture. Much of what popular culture communicates to you and to me is that we exist to serve ourselves. We exist to make ourselves happy. Follow your bliss. Follow your heart. Do what makes you happy. This is not just false teaching. This is wrong. It's not stretching the point to say that this is evil, this is demonic. If it's true that God exists, that He made everything that is, including you and me, if it's true that He created us to be in relationship with Him, if it's true, as we see here in the Scripture, that we were made to serve Jesus, that our highest purpose is found in serving Jesus, then it would make perfect sense from the adversary's point of view to try and teach us the opposite, to try and get as many people as possible to focus as much as possible on self-fulfillment would be about the worst thing you could do to a creature who was made by God for God and who is designed to find the ultimate fulfillment, the ultimate purpose in serving Jesus. So I want to warn you that if you're feeling like your life lacks purpose, lacks meaning, lacks joy, examine how you spend your life. Because it is possible that you might be misspending much of your life. You might be spending a lot of your life seeking to please yourself, seeking to serve yourself, and that is absolutely the opposite of what you have been built to do. That's why so many people feel so crappy about their life, is because they spend their life serving themselves when they were made, designed, built to serve Jesus. And believe me, when I say many, I mean many. Lots of people are struggling out there. We see lots of people struggling here in our passage. In verse 32 and 34, we read, "At evening, when the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon-possessed, and the whole city was gathered together at the door. Then he healed many who were sick with various diseases, and he cast out many demons. And he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him." It's important to point out here that the whole town, the whole city, gathers at his door. He is drawing a crowd. This is something that Jesus often does. And it's important to note the needs of the people here. They brought to the door everyone who was physically ill and also who was demon-possessed. So physical illness, that's clear. You're sick in your body, that's physical illness. But to these people, emotional distress, spiritual distress, mental distress, they would have read that. There's a very good chance that they would have understood that in terms of demonic interference, demonic oppression, demonic possession. So we have these people who are reading physical illness. We have these people who are reading perhaps what we would refer to today as mental illness or spiritual illness or emotional illness. And these people need help from Jesus. The point is this: everyone has needs, and everyone needs their needs met. If you are dealing with illness, you are not the only one. It's important here to point out that in the Greek, the word for illness is evilness, that the original audience would have seen illness as something categorically wrong, as something that was evil, as something that should not be. If you feel that way about illness, maybe you're sick, and you feel in your bones like, this is wrong, I should be right, I was made to be well. Next time you see a sick child and that thing rises up in you where you feel like, this is wrong, this must be stopped. Just recognize that as the fingerprint of God on you. Recognize that as an intuitive understanding that a good God made all things good, and then through sin, all things fell and were cursed, and that is just not right. That revulsion you have when it comes to sickness, when it comes to things being broken in the world around you, is an imprint of the life of God in you. So if you're struggling with that, if you're feeling frustrated with that today, you're not the only one. As I said earlier, you need to bring that to Jesus. All these people bring their sick and their spiritually oppressed to Jesus. He's drawing a crowd. This is a pattern with Jesus. You'll see this all throughout the Gospel of Mark. Wherever he goes, as his ministry continues to develop, he tends to draw a crowd, sometimes very large ones. That's a pattern that we need to keep in mind when it comes to our ministry and our church life. We need to be thinking in terms of crowd. You sometimes get a bit of pushback in church. If your pastor or your leadership team is talking about church growth, you may think that they're pushing that to serve their own ego. They're pushing that to serve their own financial ends. That may or may not be the case. But if it's not the case, there's a very good chance that your pastor actually has their head screwed on right. They're looking to draw a crowd because Jesus always drew a crowd. Crowds come to Jesus. So the point for us is that if we're looking to reach many, now you may not be pastoring a church, but as a Christian you should want to be reaching as many people as possible with the life-changing story of Jesus. If you want to see many people reach with the story of Jesus, make much of Jesus, because it's Jesus who draws a crowd. So keep your preaching, your teaching, keep your life about Jesus, and watch the crowds come. His behavior here with the crowd gives us a clue as to how to answer our third question, which is this: when is this going to be over already? Or the flip side of that question, when is it going to happen already? Let's look at what Jesus does in verse 34. And he did not allow the demons to speak because they knew him. Last week, Jesus is preaching in a synagogue. A demon-possessed guy jumps up, starts shrieking, "I know who you are, the Holy One of God." The point here is simple. Jesus is not ready to get blown up onto the national stage as the Messiah yet. He doesn't want the word getting out about who he is just yet, because in the words of John 7, verse 8, his time had not yet fully come. We need to remember that Jesus was on a mission. Okay? Jesus knew that once he hit Jerusalem, it was going to be game on with the crucifixion, his resurrection, and ascension looming. And he knew that it all had to happen in what the Scripture refers to as the fullness of time. Throughout his life, Jesus submits himself to the will of the Father. We get the sense in studying the story of Jesus that he is submitting his journey to the will of the Father, that he is taking his cues, if you will, from the Father. And so we get the sense here that he's waiting for the time to be right. He's waiting for things to be good and ready. He is biding his time. The point here is simple. Jesus was patient. So because Jesus was patient, you and I should be patient. Put in the simplest way, we take our cues from Jesus. So when it comes to question 1, when facing trials, we get up because we know that one day Jesus is going to raise us up. Question 2, when our life feels purposeless, we remember that we exist to know him and to serve him. That's our reason for being. When it comes to question 3 and we're feeling impatient with a tough season or pining for a new season to come, we stay patient because we look to Jesus.